I just wanted to break the ice just by introducing myself. My name is Raj. People call me Balaji as well. So I'm a lead UI consultant at jcpenny.com at current. Prior to this, I was with flipkart.com as a senior web UI engineer. So where I did most part of the React, bootstrapping, and um, so prior to that, I was with Sapient, and then Pramati is a product-based company out of Hyderabad. So so my experience is a combination of product plus service. So I did support world-class clients like Harley Davidson, WWE, Farms.com, and TireRack.com, which is a e-commerce company in US. So I started with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which is primarily with the version of 5, and I have been experiencing that since almost 7-8 years. I have a couple of open source scaffolding libraries on my name. So currently, I'm working in a core platform where we are building up a platform which will help developers to build React components. So it's not even straight away making the React components. It's like leveraging a platform where people take the help of this platform and build React components on top of that. And so just to give a very high level insight, so this is the description, but the platform do come with so many reusable components which are like add-ons to the developer. So a developer who has a minimal knowledge on React can onboard the platform, have a little bit learning curve, learning the React, learning the platform, as well as start developing the components which again are reusable across the company. So that's a very brief insight on my side. On apart from working, and I do a lot of chatty work, and I'm a speaker and I'm a writer. So as discussed with Shiva, right? So the agenda which was set for me is to facilitate the consultants with the technologies like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then take a deep walkthrough on object-oriented JavaScript. Again, writing reusable classes, following several set of design patterns, making the best use of JavaScript, avoid memory leaks, and learn the best practices in CSS, how to avoid recomputation in the CSS, write a minimal and effective HTML and CSS so that it can be used across the web page and across the site, in fact across the company. So the world is moving toward the material UI. So material UI is again subjective, where people treat it as a reusable component, which is again themable. So apart from these, we would be talking about several set of libraries as and when required, like like something like jQuery, if required, Twilight and other animation libraries if required, or else we can start and have a good amount of time on one of the framework in deeply, and touch basing the other frameworks like Angular if required, right? Or else we'll have a walkthrough on one definitive framework, and we'll have a high level walkthrough on another framework, or whichever works, vice versa, or if time permits, having a deep walkthrough on both the frameworks. So the difference between a library and a framework is we call the library, we call a method in it, or a class in it, whereas a framework sets a set of regulations for us. So we follow a framework, whereas we use the library, we call the library as and when required. So how to write our JavaScript journey will start from writing basic functions to object-oriented functions, and then writing a reusable code which is termed as library. We cannot definitely develop a framework, not even in a training session, maybe not in outside the world, because once we get hold of a framework, we can understand the type of leverage what the framework gives us. So it's pretty much already built and it is very vast. So reinventing the wheel is not a better idea. So we can have a better understanding on the UI where the world was before the framework had come, and post that how the UI is perceived now. Why is the UI developers called as rock stars these days, just because of their UX thinking, as well as most cutting edge stuff what they do. So what does actually framework gives for us? So we'll start from there. And so before which, what are the features we'll think that what can make the web better? And definitely where are we? So we cannot definitely build all these stuff. And so which frameworks helps in which direction? So Angular was meant to give a direction to a UI dev in one direction, so two-way data binding in a very high level one liner. Whereas other part of the frameworks like Ember.js, ReactJS, and other frameworks have their own set of direction, like single way binding or unidirectional data flow. So we'll see which works better. And so the framework is chosen accordingly. So the framework decision is made by the business use case. And having said that, we can achieve things in a round robin fashion, where we can choose a framework and make that work to the use case. Even that that happens with the most of the companies today in the world, because they choose the best framework which works in the very performant way, and then they try to design their use case probably in the way the framework thinks. So earlier, whenever we start a website, I am very sorry to make these statements prior understanding your roles and responsibilities you guys were handling prior, or the education level. So this was how the world was moving, is it? So whenever a website has to be launched, be it a e-commerce, be it a marketplace, be it a healthcare, be it a insurance domain, or be it a telecom domain, the entire site has to be thoroughly tested for the regressions, and each and every cycle has to go through multiple checks, and then the site will be released. So the release cycle is a very hectic process which require a lot of energy and money. Whereas with the intrusion of UI components, all pages would behave as a different application on its own. Deploying or bringing a particular application to a customer is made very easy with all these frameworks. And so in fact, like all these other sidelining things like QA verification, security verification, pipeline check, all those things can be avoided, and the focus can only be put on that particular page, and the rest of the pages don't even get affected when this particular page is deployed. So how about cache bursting, right? How the network optimization can be utilized, and why is a UI developer worried about that? Because most of the times we work with the customer's bandwidth, and that is very precious. So not everyone in the world have a access to huge amount of internets and higher bandwidths. So we have to be choosy in application, choosy in developing the applications where it works well with the low bandwidth networks, and scalably it behaves differently in an incredibly high bandwidths. So all these fruits were provided by the frameworks to us. So we can have walkthrough on how the optimization has to be leveraged at network level, and what are the key metrics we need to look in the UI end, so that the site can be more optimal and faster. And though we work as a single entity in a company, which is called as an application, or which can be in terms treated as a web page, or one page or one set of pages within a website, but the companies are more worried about the cost. Whereas what if the same card or same button what you see in one page, which can't I reuse in other pages as well, so that the dev effort is like barely minimized, so barely utilized, right? So if you if you develop a set of reusable components, say 10 to 12, probably if my page require only 5 of them, I don't require a dev at all. But so the world is just starting, not even 0.05% of the world is achieving this. Very few companies in the market have achieved this, and they are so everyone is getting onto this architecture now. So we go with a component based architecture, so that all my page is just a collection of reusable pieces, and my feature development by the product manager will be driven with this UX UI, and not with the legacy way of thinking, like this feature comes with something random colors and some magical animations. So that's where the UI developers are required to think like this and develop these particular stuff. So that is a basic expectation, and that is the agenda of the sessions what we are going to have. So obviously how one key thing which I missed is Ajax. So the way we make asynchronous calls from our JavaScript layer, and how we leverage the data, how we leverage this capability of Ajax. This has been in use like since long time, like around 2006 and 2007. And one good point I would like to mention is all the technologies what we are talking about is just hardly like 3-year old. Whereas Ajax is the older guy, whereas he's like 2004 or 5, invented it like 13 years ago. Whereas the legacy technologies, what we see, right, in IBM mainframe, Java, .NET, they are like 20, 25-year-old. So the world wants something. So the need came because they want something to be captured. So especially, mobile, especially, to capture the mobile domain. So they need a new, better technology. Adobe Flex and Flash was not working for them. And the existing HTML4 version was definitely not working for them. If you need to be intuitive in terms of what you represent to the customer, then the technology had so much of limitations, and even the browsers were not that much hi-fi those days, because the focus was not put on there. The focus was main in the backend. So since the focus is changing, the capacity of the browsers are changing. Since the power of the browser is getting enriched, so the computation power of the JavaScript is getting enriched. So the people are really focusing on. They are not worried on what if my framework takes this much of size. That particular worry has been cut off, because the browser is now capable of executing that much piece of code. So earlier, when I started working in around 2010, the IE8 was majorly in use, and the kind of knowledge what IE has was very absolute, and it was very legacy, and the maximum number of lines of code that IE8 can understand was like barely minimum. But since the world was traveling in a different direction, users were forced to close their IE browsers and walk towards Brave, Chrome, Safari, Mozilla Firefox, and latest version like IE11 and Metro versions of IEs. So this forced that, whereas the world was controlled by IE, but now the story got flip-flopped. So every browser is now very capable of computing so much of JavaScript, but at the same time, we have to be very cautious in doing so. That's where there was never a compiler where we cannot create an infinite loop. There was always a loophole. So unknowingly we do that gets hanged, the browser gets hanged, and the web page is screwed. So we have to be little conscious. Though the browser is capable, it itself has limitations, and it has an upper bound. So that's a brief walkthrough where the world was, and we can have in deep discussion when handling each and every component, or when handling each and every technology, how it was, and how it is, why it is. Okay, so that's a brief intro on the agenda. So if you guys have any questions, we can I can take it up. So, or if you guys want to have a quick demo on one any of the particular technology like JavaScript, or how component based architecture works in React or Angular, or just a very high level walkthrough on HTML and CSS, we can definitely start, and we'll see how it goes. So over to you guys. So you guys have any questions?
I think Pranita is out of meeting. Maybe some network problem. Varshagar, if you have any clarifications or anything you want to know.
Yeah, no questions from my end.
Okay. So does this agenda works for you, like the schedule what we are planning now, or you need you have any special interests on any other areas that we should include in the sessions what we are going to take?
No, nothing in particular. But like, if you can just give a demo, I think that will be good.
Demo in the sense, especially looking at which side, like you want to have some high level discussion on JavaScript or
Yeah, like high level difference between JavaScript and AngularJS specifically.
okay.
And I have a small question. This is Neeta here.
Mm-hmm.
So how many days does it take to complete the whole course? Is there any particular schedule?
So this is a bit flexible because it goes with the availability of the entire attendees who are participating in the course. So typically, the last time when we handled, we pretty much covered HTML, CSS, all the topics discussed, and so it depends on the amount what we spend every day also. So we planned for 1 hour a day and for particular session, but sometimes this 1 hour got extended to 1.5 hours based on the team availability. So if they are willing to take more time, we were just extending, and but it went around 35 to 40 days if I remember correctly.
Okay. So do you have any list of topics which you are going to cover in this? Like, do you have a copy of it so that?
I have the deck in my personal laptop, and I am not operating
Yeah,
today. I'm
one
sorry.
sec. Raj, 1 second.
Yeah.
I'm just putting the guideline content on WhatsApp for all the attendees.
Okay.
And in these, there are a few changes, like the Angular sessions were less, that is going to be increased. This is a rough cut plan. Depending on the requirement, enhancement of the topics also can be done.
Okay.
Yeah, you can just
Thank
carry on. We have Venkatesh with us. Venkat Garu, hi, welcome.
Yeah, hi. Hi, mate.
Yeah, Raj just started the things and he's about to show the application in AngularJS. If you have any pre-redeemed questions, you can put in front of Flo.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Because he's going to proceed to show some application. Before that, if you have anything to discuss, you can discuss. If not, we can discuss in the end of the session.
Yeah, I'm good. We can go with the application.
Okay. So you guys want me to walk through an application or start with a demo and a technology? So what I was pursuing was a bit different. So we'll go with what suits best for the team.
Maybe demo on a technology.
Okay. So I can start with my previous company. So how we were leveraging React. So it works pretty much same way. Okay. So some terminology what I would like to mention here is a generic term called component, whereas the same would be called as a directive in Angular 1.x. So I would be very spectacle in talking about Angular 2 or Angular 3 or 4 or 5, because the release cycles have been so fast, and there has been a bit instability in the builds what they are releasing. So before which I would like to even mention about a package, what do you say, host called npm. So this is how it goes. So npm JS. So npm JS. So as you all guys know, right? So we might be using Node to compile our JavaScript at sometimes in the session or in the future whenever we get any assignment. So what Node.js typically do is, Node.js is just a compiler, just like any other Apache Maven or any other JVM. So those JVMs understand Java, whereas Node.js understands JavaScript and talks to the kernel while converting this JavaScript language to a machine understandable language. So Node.js is developed in JavaScript and it understands JavaScript. So typically, it even opened the windows for us for developing isomorphic applications. So isomorphic application is so this session would be very high level. So some things would be really surprising. So please just ignore them. So isomorphism is the latest trend where an application as a whole or as a individual component can either be executed in client or even in server. So today in the today world, so many companies are maintaining their servers with Node.js and not with any other compilers. The reason being, all the front-end stack has been developed in JavaScript. So now the server which processes my data or which processes my code is a JavaScript compiler and not a JVM compiler or any other compiler. So this particular JavaScript compiler compiles my JavaScript to HTML and returns back to the browser. When that particular HTML goes to the client, that particular HTML decides which API to call, what data to get, and what to represent. Typically, this is how it flows. So earlier, what used to do was like they used to make all the calls in the backend, get the data, compile the entire set of HTML, and then give it back to the browser. Now, even the Node.js do a similar job, but with a varied design. So all the components are, for example, if we take this current page an example, right? So the header, what we see in the red color, are a search component, correct, or any of the listed promoted packages here. So they would have built one component with some set of HTML markers within it. That particular component, sometimes it comes with the data or it comes to the front end, makes a call to the backend, and then decide what to load within it. So another best example what I can show is if you land on any e-commerce company. Okay, so that's a bad search. What happened? No internet connection. Something went wrong because of this post plugin. Yeah, so it was because of one of my add-on, it was not giving the data. So if you guys see most of the, if you guys see, right, so that loading symbol, right, and the images are not getting loaded yet. So it's because we generate only one component, and that particular component comes to the front end and decides what data to load. So whenever we hit this particular page, the markup would be as minimal as it gives one class, whether in React or Angular. That particular class comes to the front end and then it decides what to load. So typically this is a search page, correct? And search loads a component called probably a search wrapper. So that search wrapper makes a call to the backend. I don't know if this is completely server side or client side. Let me just check the luck. Okay. That was an old one. So I think they have changed it a lot. Electronics categories. Okay, let me not waste the time. Okay, so if you observe, so the first request which comes from the backend, it would not, it would essentially contain the HTML as well, whereas in the source as well, if you guys observe, we get the HTML, compiled HTML as well, only for the content which is above the fold. So it's a latest trend again. So I would not be compiling the entire set of components in the server side, because whatever the user first see, so all we try to reduce is the first byte time. So the first paint what user see decides our time. So it should be less than 5 seconds ideally. So whatever the user see above the fold, we know what he is going to see. So we gonna pre-compile those components in our Node.js container, and then send across the HTML back to the front end. Whereas in the front end, the moment he hits a URL, he first see the HTML coming and getting painted, and he would be able to use it. But it would not be the case always, whereas it would take, it's unnecessary to compile all the entire page and send it across to the end user, because it's a time consuming process, as well as the data will become obsolete very soon. For example, you might be running a marketing banner which would expire so and so the entire cache bursting architecture of the stream has to be re-architectured, because the compiled marketing banner is now obsolete. So uh, uh, you have to pretty much make your content expiry, your cache expiry in all the nodes, on or even in Akamai, and then recompile your page, something called as warm cache, and then supply to the Akamai. So which would again cache our page. So we can avoid such hiccups and make the pipeline so much smoother by only compiling the components which are which will live longer. Okay, so whenever that particular marketing banner comes and loads, that we only send a component to the front end, say typical HTML component which is a React class or an Angular directive, that come and sit in the browser and then decide what to do. So the components, they decide themselves what to load, so which API to call. So they call the API, the pretty much the API gives a new data for them every time. They consume the data, and these components are in such a way that they will contain model, view, controller. Whenever the model gets updated, the view again changes by itself. So you see a new component. So there is a lot of optimization happening across the streams, not just a web page level. So you see so many things which are getting saved by unnecessarily avoiding them. So all pages are going to be very long cache, and they would be very healthy. So I'll show another example. So for example, this particular page has been initially server side rendered, but next time whenever you make a change, this component mounts. So this would have pretty much loaded one class, and then that particular class had made an API call which gave them some data, something like this, in which gender woman is already selected, and it has got a different UI look, as well as woman is selected just because this flag says selected true, whereas others are selected false. And what you have just seen is the entire recompilation of the page with the new data, including this. You see, if you have observed, there were a different set of shirts earlier. So it just made a HTTP request with this, and then the data is entirely different, right? So for example, I just make a call to get this data. So I don't need to pre-compile anything, because all my classes are ready in the DOM, and all they need to do is, whenever I just click on this, the URL changes. It means that the entire page remounts. So what is remounting? That's a life cycle hook what our framework gives us, whether React or Angular. So it means that the component again gets placed, and whenever it places himself in the browser, what it should do, it should make an API call. So they made an API call, and they got some data, and they just painted those data. So these are all 44 shirts what we have with just 2 pages of data, without which, I'm sorry, I think network is very slow for some reason. Whereas removing that every time gives me new set of options. I don't know which ID they are using. If you observe, it's 506 pages now. Correct. So entire data, entire everything gets changed with the new data and with a very minimum amount of time, because all these components are maintained internally as references in the frameworks, and they are just instantiated the number of times we want. If we see this product card, some might have stars, some might not have stars. So these guys have stars, but with a different data. Some guys might have some set of extra data, some set of different variations of data, but all are handled within the component on how to render when a data is given. For example, when a particular flag was given, this gets a new label, whereas this guy don't get. But because that particular product card configure response does not have a key new, for example, that's a contract what you have finalized with the API team. So this component go through all the data and then builds what it was trying to do. So that's how one instance, or whenever instances are required, it create multiple instances very effectively. And the beauty is not just that, and the beauty is how it updates the DOM. So whenever we see these set of HTML, right? So it's a pretty big HTML. I mean, every node will have like thousands of childs ranging with different set of properties and different attributes. Correct. So how effective my next markup is going to affect the user. So for example, you have these many childs, but typically if you see this particular facet would have been a component, and they are just reused with a different title with a different product count. That's it, as simple as it. If it can be repeated like 1,000 times or n number of times the developer wants. And the same search component, if you guys observe, with this same with the same look and feel, but with a different title, but pretty much what they do the same job. So whenever something is searched, they update their results, and when you search here, they update their results, right? So it's just that we develop once and we use it as many times as we want. And in fact, this particular accordion would be developed only once, one section it would have developed, and they are just reusing it many times with just the change in properties. In fact, this would be an accordion section with a different theme. So everything is like themable. So theme is like a separate CSS only for that particular section. Whereas this component, which comes as an overlay, might be one component which is getting used here as well. So with a different children. So what we place in the model changes, but the behavior, the behavior from scratch, how the model mounts into the page, how it disappears. So you click on a close button, the slider goes away. You click some hook, the slider comes in, the icon is different and is again configurable. You click on the same icon, which is meant, which is the exit point, or the icons can be n number of things, but they call a same method, which closes the slider, which opens up the slider, which closes up the slider. All is like one component which mounts different sets of data. Whereas whenever that particular children mounts in that particular component, they decide what to do. For example, this particular has a tree. When clicking on that, they know what to render. In fact, we are going to the deeper chain, we are coming back. So it's if we see, there are like so many reusable lines within the same code. So only this particular component has been developed with the back arrow. So it's just the same component with a different theme. So the arrow comes here, the arrow comes here. You click on that, so there is no change. I don't know why this guy don't have arrow. Maybe that directly takes us to the matrix page. So it indicates that there are no sub children. So that's how reusability works. One component physically what we see might not be always reusable, or which we can't see might also be reusable. For example, rendering an icon or rendering an image requires a lot of science, requires a lot of agreements between one company and the place where they host the images. And most of the cases, images are self-hosted within the servers, or they would be getting served from Adobe Scene 7, or they would be coming from Google Libs or or Adobe DAM images, or there might be different sources for it. So whenever we render an image, I want a unified experience where the image will have this much of optimal ratio. So every time whenever a developer want to include an image, he need not to go through all the checks, described in the team or in the company or in the particular project, whereas that particular piece can be written as one component. All they need is different set of URL every time, as simple as it is. So all the checks have been coded once. Every time you want an image, you supply a different URL. Going through satisfying all the checks what you have been decided, and then loading that image, rendering that, would be one-time logic. So for example, what I can show, if you observe, every page has a footer, and typically in most of the cases this footer don't change, and it's more of like static content, and it don't has any dynamic content. So what they do is they develop one component. If I can show a page, you see it's just one component. You say footer. Okay, everything is very bad now. So give me a moment, folks. Just building that in. So it's because of the bad internet connectivity, my node got disconnected. So one-time building takes time, and from there it's like so easy. So if you guys observe, I just removed a footer component. So it's as simple as this. Because it's just a block of code, and the entire header is gone. So it's just a reusable piece, right? So I just want to, whoever want to start a page, they don't have to worry about so many common things that a developer have to do. So all those reusable pieces have been already provided, and that's not all. So many variable colors, so many set of rules, so many icon definitions have been already provided for the developer, where he can just focus on what he has to build. If it is already built, then just reuse it, make your job quicker. So just do a frequent releases. That's it. So that's how building web pages with components work. So whenever, suppose it would be too early to show something. So for example, we have a marketing zone. All we set is a different set of data to that particular component. When I set something, it behaves in a way, and when I set it in a different way, it behaves in a different way. And how it has to behave should be completely defined and should be completely called, should be completely trained to that particular component, and wherever you want, you just reuse it. So I'll give a very quick demo. So for example, you want to have a type of filter category. Okay, so this is a filter category where it has just a checkbox, but this is a filter. Okay, this is a filter category where it has got some price range, and there is a filter category with just, you know, stars in it. I don't have colors, is it right? Something is wrong with the network. Okay. So we don't have different type of like image category, color category, or you know, other sets of categories, but this particular series has only checkboxes and then stars. Correct. So there was and whether to show search within a category or not is just already, you know, put into the component. If the API response is search within the filter is available, just show it. That's it. So something like that. So that pretty much depends on the contract, how we you know, finalize with the backend. This does not have an API response. So this says search available true. We would just enable, we will just go enable the search within this particular category, and when it is enabled, what it has to do is already defined again. So as simple as that. Now if a recent example I'm quoting, so there was an ask where we just show some more tabs here which have the same set of data. And so guess what, it was just built in like 15 minutes, because so what to show the API is already giving. I'll just, we have to just go put a wrapper around there, and then this particular tab component is again built. I don't know, in this page we're not using that, but this tab component is already built in. So whenever we build a website, the experience has to be unique across the product. So sometimes having a different icon with a different meaning, sometimes having a different icon with a different meaning does not make a sense. So that would confuse the user, and it would put a delta impact on the product. So with this particular component pattern, we can even achieve a standard UX across the product, but it would become a monotony at times. So we can have a different theme, like so the tab can have a different background, different color of shade, but as a whole, the behavior of tab, when you click it, when you toggle it, or when you go to different category without enabling the others, so that would be common. And what you put in the tab is up to the developer who consumes it, right? So just go put a you know, same kind of container within that particular component, right? Filter category with just a data source, with the data what it has to show. So this has to show what, which would be provided in the API response. It takes the API response, it sees that, okay, this is a checkbox component where it has a title and a checkbox with the product count. This requires a search within the filter. Also it requires the data like this, it requires a data like this, and nothing is again, you know, reinvented. So this is another, you know, example where we can, you know, leverage the reusability. So this is how it goes. We will keep on building components which would be, you know, shared. So another place where I see, you see, so filter category with the different data. So the data comes different in the in here. It makes its own call. It gets the response, and then it builds this. Whereas whenever this mounts, it don't make the call again because it was trained like that. The reason being, this component has already made a call and that is what the data what this guy needs. So this data which was already fetched would be reused. So how do we reuse? So we need to have one set of modal. So modal is the placeholder which holds the entire data representation of the HTML page at any given point of time. So that particular modal holds a JavaScript object with all the data what it has to represent, and the view which is a React component go render it. So how we leverage that particular model in either Angular or React? So in React we have something called a store, whereas we have something called a service in Angular. So terminology is different, but pretty much the job what they do, it's almost same. So whenever you make a request, you put it in your service in Angular or you put it in your store in React, and whenever you want the same data, so you should be knowing what key you are looking at. So I'm looking at a key called filters, which is same here. So this guy just go make a call and read the key called filters. So if he is doing this, probably in fact he is not even the one who was making the call. Someone else would have already made the call, and he is just consuming that particular key. Or it might even end up that this particular component, as in when it mounts, it makes its own request, go update the store, and then listen to the store, get the data, and then render it. Whereas in Angular, we consume a service. So whenever a component mounts, it makes an XHR call or Ajax call to the backend, consume a microservice, get the response, put it in service, and whenever modal changes, view gets notified. How that particular glue is maintained, it would be beautifully expressed by the framework. So whenever my modal gets updated, it automatically calls what is defined as a view. So that particular view which gets called with the new data. So whenever it gets called with the new data, it re-renders again. So rendering is like painting in the screen. So it repaints entire stuff again in the front end. That's what pretty much we want. So that's the concept of reusability, and that's how we leverage something called style. For example, styling itself is a lot of investment in terms of developers' time. So you want to style something, it has to be tested in different versions of operating systems in different mobiles with different versions. So some of them might not be using, some of them might be using one syntax, one compiler version which don't support one syntax. Or if I have to step back a bit and talk about the history of HTML, JavaScript, CSS is owned by no company. Everyone can pretty much prepare or develop their own compiler which can understand HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So that's how it started, where Microsoft had its own compiler which understand its own syntax and everything, whereas companies like Firefox had their own syntax. So I don't want to step back one more step and then introduce the fights happened between these companies, and they agreed to have a common standard. But now the industry is so mature that there is a forum called W3C, World Wide Web Consortium. They define the direction on how HTML has to go. Pretty much the advantage of being a W3C compiled browser is it has been certified by the W3C company. When it gets some leverage of having certificates and everything. So typically, if, for example, a company is developing their own browser and it is not at all compatible with W3C standards, so when acquiring some certificates, right? So you guys might be hearing a term called HTTP and HTTPS. So all those trustee certificates will have a big issue because they don't know what you are doing internally. You are not a certified JavaScript compiler. So pretty much you can steal the user's information. You can pretty much do whatever you want. Correct? So all those issues will come. So very less companies would tend to develop web pages which suits your compiler. So your compiler will never get limelight. So never limelight is equal to money. So for example, my browser has 40% of the world share. Safari has 40% of the world share. Say Google go to Safari and says, make my website as a default search engine, I would pay $300 million to you every year. So that's how. So if So if it has more user share, then it has more revenue. So every browser is coming to a common standard which now accepts a similar syntax. If we code JavaScript in one syntactical way, it is common across the browsers, which was different earlier. So if it is IE, then it is going to be a separate syntax altogether. If it is going to be Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and any other thing, it was a bit different. The way we attach the event listeners and the way we listen to the promises and everything was different. So slowly now, since everyone came to a common state, it is now very easy to code HTML which is compatible across the browsers. But still, the browser might be a bit old. It might not be supporting the syntax or technology what we are coding for. For example, take an IE8 browser, consider a mobile which has IE8 in it, and you don't know how to resolve a CSS3 syntax, which is a latest syntax. IE8 is not enriched with the capabilities of CSS3. So you code something from CSS3 in CSS3, the user opens it in IE8, it completely breaks because it don't understand what that syntax is, what that particular feature do. So all these testing requires a lot of effort. So if we have a unified reusable CSS, for example, this particular CSS is defined once and is getting reused across instances, then it is very easy for even, the entire, if we can think of application as a holistic product, then it saves all the efforts like QA efforts in terms of testing through multiple devices, multiple resolutions, multiple operating systems with multiple versions and all those things. So all this time gets saved. So developer speed, productivity will get variably increased, and we'll have a better product with a lot of performance gains. So this is how a component based architecture works, but it's just a syntax which matter in in terms of Angular or React, but the developers mindset in coding Angular and React is pretty much same. Okay. Yes, Arvind, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, Arvind.
Yes, sir. I have some questions regarding it.
Yeah.
So, what are the typical questions they will ask in the interview while you apply for a job? Like in the sense, if they ask such questions as what did you do in the background, what are the typical responsibilities of a UI developer? Can you list some of them so that I will take a note of it?
Yeah, I'll list down the typical responsibilities of the UI developer. So with the last 20 minutes walkthrough on the component architecture, right? So if something is invariably different, the designer has no idea on how the tabs has been implemented in others page, and he gives an altogether a new design. Okay, so which would confuse the user as well as it is not efficient. Okay, so most of the times the UI developer responsibility starts with the talking to the product manager, where you get the high level idea and in deep business use case on what that particular feature do to you. So for example, if he says go add a set of promoted filter, which is like you need not to open a filter panel and then you can quickly apply some set of filters from here. So the UI developer has to be concerned morely on the business side, whereas you need to clearly understand the business case so that you can log properly. How many users have been clicking here? How many of them are opening and doing nothing and just closing the page? How many of them, after opening here, they got interest and opening filters and then they selected something and they selected a product, went to add to cart, and then the purchase intent was high and the conversion really went high. Without this particular component, how was the impact? So it was more of understanding the business side of the feature from the product manager and then conveying the same to the design team. So design team would be clueless what to design if not explained properly. So the UI developer has to have a holistic idea about the application first, and then have to sit with the UX designer and convey the same. So if the feature is something else but the design is something else, if it is not conveyed properly, then it would not be used properly. So sitting with the design team for an efficient design. And then the main challenge comes with the microservices part. So how you end up the contract, how you design the contract for your component. So that's pretty much, so these days I have seen this trend changing a lot, especially in the last 2 years. Not just in any specific company, it's like overall. So the API is used to give a kind of response which UI developers used to negotiate and then include in their components. Whereas now most of the times the UI developer decides the contract and then convey the same to the API team that I need this contract which is more efficient with a less number of keys and with maximum UI painting. So UI developer has to work very closely with the API team in order to finalize the contract and what he wants in order to represent what. So if you understand the business correctly, sometimes basing on the product owner's requirement, you might get a search within filter and how you want, on what basis you want to enable this particular feature, right? So one key is enough. For example, if it is a nested architecture, you don't want that. It has to be very simple and straightforward. So it has to be something like that. So this is a typical life cycle or typical day of a UI developer in any organization.
So what about the backend? Does he do any backend?
Depends. So if he has been hired as a full stack developer, he is supposed to develop that services as well. In most of the times now, the focus has been growing towards artificial intelligence and data management. Having said that, the confidence level of those companies is because the front end can be managed anyhow effectively. Now we need to think of something which is big. So move to there. Now a UI developer who is intuitive enough in writing a service, all you need is write a SQL query and get the data from the database. So for that, your company might already have some set of wrappers. So if you are expected to do that, if you are hired as a full stack developer, then you have to write some services, get the data, in which case you get a lot of leverage because you work in the front end, back end, front end and middleware, sorry, not in the back end. So front end and the middleware, and then how you get the data, how you set the content expiry for the same, how you consume it, you would build an awesome product.
Okay.
But it's not guaranteed always, right? So people want experts in each and every field. So they would not. So it depends on the company, size of the company. If it is a mid-sized or small-sized company, they cannot afford more number of developers. So what they do is they want less number of people who do all jobs for them. So they hire full stack developer. If you go to a pretty big organization, all the roles are like fully defined. They have experts in each and every field.
So can you tell me regarding more about microservices?
It's very vast and microservices can never be discussed. We can have a walk through about microservices in one of the sessions. What we definitely see, a microservice is nothing but so microservices has different variations. Again, there are aggregators, there are Akamai ESIs, there are IRIs kind of microservices. There are several set of microservices. Microservice itself is like a kind of vast topic. So microservice is like what that particular component do, that what particular that component want. For example, you want a filter, so your service would give you only data related to filter. It's a microservice, right? The name itself says very small service which will give you very small data. Whereas our legacy systems would decide the entire contract for a page at once and then give it to the JSPs or C# .NETs or any of the UI layers, which is not changed.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Sir, what are the what is the advantage of ReactJS over AngularJS?
So they
two-way data binding.
It's not that simple because so there are a lot of cycles involved in updating the DOM. So updating the DOM is the most costly thing in the cycle of a UI updation. So it requires, so the pretty much what we see in the browser is not a simple representation of markup. It has to talk to hardware and get the each and every pixel data what we see. If you can zoom on to your computer, you can see a lot of small tiny dots on your browser, on your screen. So every smallest micro dot is called as a pixel, and all the pixel data would be calculated by the hardware, would be given back to the browser based on the browser's position on the scroll position of the browser. So whenever you just go update this tree, so HTML tree is like pretty vast with a lot of properties. And if you can randomly open any of the website what and just look into the number of nodes what they have, it would definitely range from 15,000 like 25,000 maybe more, right? So, and having a data structure with that 15,000 nodes is not a small thing. So how you update that particular tree when you update, right? There is a lot of maturity in React, whereas Angular is like very old in terms of doing that. So Angular applications are relatively slow in terms of UI painting. I am very careful in my word. They are only slow in terms of painting the UI, as well as the component architecture is way beyond mature in React, whereas it's like lagging in Angular. Still in Angular 5, if we see the way you define Angular component, it undergoes so many things, and you have very less control on how that component can be handled by the developer. Whereas these entire processes, right? That's why they invented a new framework altogether, or else they would have simply leveraged the existing thing and then built something, right? The Facebook definitely don't want that, so they came up with a new framework altogether and named it as React. And since it's isomorphic, right? So if you want to develop an Android app, just develop a React web page and use a React native compiler. Just compile it into Android native code without having a Android developer in hand. You can pretty much develop an Android app or an iOS app or a Windows app, which is not possible in Angular.
Okay, sir, where exactly do we use the Ajax calls?
Whenever you want to get any data from the backend.
Okay, can we use it in in the JavaScript file which we write? Can we use it in that?
We have to use it in JavaScript only.
Okay, we have to use it. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, sir. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So Shiva will guide all of us on when to have a session, on what time we wind up and what is the plan. Pretty much he would have shared with all of you guys about the key highlights what we might have a discussion. But having said that, it does not cover all the topics. The list is constantly updated with the new asks. Whenever there is a new ask, we can definitely take it up. So that's it for today, guys. So
any questions, Neeta, Varsha, Venkatesh?
Sorry, sir, I didn't get you.
Anything you want to know? Any questions you have?
No questions, sir.
Next, Varsha, do you have anything?
No, Shiva, I'm good. Thank you.
Venkat, do you have anything to discuss or to get information from Raj? Yeah, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. What is the difference between client-side and server-side validations?
It itself again takes a lot of time. So server-side validation is validation, right? So what is validation? Validation is I have a set of rules. The data given by you, is it valid or not? So, and where you want to do this validation. So for example, my password has to be should contain one uppercase letter, one special character, one number. Then only I call it as valid. And where you are doing this validation, either you are doing it as at client side or doing it at your compiler level or like backend. So that's called server side validation, or this is called client side validation.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank
guys.
you guys for attending. Let us close the session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.